The rain was falling hard that night, the kind of rain that makes the streets glisten like black glass. Most drivers had already given up and gone home, but Amir, a middle-aged taxi driver with tired eyes and a thinning wallet, kept his old yellow cab moving through the storm. He had bills to pay, a family waiting back in a cramped apartment, and no choice but to keep the engine running. The city never slept, and neither could he. That's when he saw her, a figure in white standing at the curb, drenched, shivering, mascara running down her face. At first, Amir thought she was just another party guest caught in the weather, but then he noticed the veil clinging to her soaked hair. A bride. Alone. Crying. He pulled over, the wipers squeaking across the windshield as she yanked the door open and slid inside. Her dress left wet stains on the cracked leather seats, but she didn't seem to care. She looked at him with wide, desperate eyes, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Please, just drive." Amir hesitated. He had been driving long enough to know when something wasn't right. Most brides didn't leave their weddings in the middle of the night, alone, without a bag, without even shoes. But there was something in her voice, broken, fragile, that made him put the car into gear anyway. As the cab rolled forward, he stole glances at her through the rearview mirror. She looked no older than 22, maybe 23. The sequins on her gown caught flashes of neon lights as they passed shuttered storefronts. Her breathing was shaky, her hands clutching the folds of her dress as though she was holding herself together. Finally, Amir cleared his throat and asked gently, "Where to?" There was a long silence. He thought she hadn't heard him. But then, in a voice barely louder than the rain, she said an address. It was on the far edge of the city, a place Amir rarely drove. A neighborhood where the streetlights grew dim and most cab drivers avoided unless they had no choice. Her words sent a small chill through him, though he couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the way she said it, her voice hollow, like she wasn't really there. Amir almost asked if she was okay, if someone had hurt her, if she needed to go to the police. But something about the look in her eyes stopped him. Those weren't just tears. That was fear. He gripped the wheel tighter, his stomach knotting. He didn't know what kind of trouble this young woman had run from, or what he was driving toward. All he knew was that the rain wasn't the only thing making the night feel heavy. As the cab turned off the main road and the streetlights began to thin, Amir couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stepped into someone else's story, one he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the ending of. And then, the bride leaned forward, her cold hand brushing his shoulder, and whispered something that made his heart skip a beat. Amir's cab hummed quietly as they drove through streets slick with rain, the kind of silence that makes even the smallest sound, like a drip from a gutter, feel loud. He tried to break it, to make small talk, but the bride didn't answer. He caught herself fiddling with her ring, twisting it over and over, like she was trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. Amir's life had never been easy. Born into a working-class family, he'd learned early that survival meant long hours and little rest. He had a small apartment, a teenage son who loved drawing but hated math, and a wife who had left years ago, tired of scraping by. Driving a cab was all he had, and some nights like this, he wondered if it was enough. But tonight, he didn't think about himself. He couldn't. Not with her there. The bride's name was Layla, though Amir only learned it after she finally muttered it when he asked about the wedding she had clearly abandoned. She had grown up in a wealthy family, the kind of family that threw weddings so big the city would whisper about them for months. But Layla's eyes told a story that no glittering hall could mask. She wasn't happy. She wasn't even sure she wanted to get married. Something darker had been brewing behind the perfect smiles and expensive gowns. She spoke in fragments, little pieces of her life spilling out between sobs and pauses. Her fiancé, Amir realized, was someone she didn't love, someone she felt trapped by. He had met her once or twice before, at family dinners where she smiled politely, laughed when expected, but never really felt like herself. Now, sitting in a beaten-up taxi, drenched and trembling, the mask was gone. Amir listened quietly, giving her space, letting her speak when she wanted. It wasn't his business, and yet he felt drawn in by her story. He had learned long ago that everyone carried secrets, some heavier than others, and tonight, he was sitting beside one that weighed more than he could imagine. The cab moved farther from the center of the city, into areas where the streetlights were fewer and the shadows longer. Layla kept glancing at the darkened windows, the empty shops, her knuckles white around the folds of her dress. She said she had nowhere to go, nowhere safe, no friends who would take her in. Her family, she couldn't even call them. Amir felt a lump in his throat. He had spent most of his life avoiding trouble, keeping his head down, but he couldn't just leave her in this storm. Something told him that wherever they were going, this ride wasn't just about distance, it was about survival. Every instinct he had screamed caution, and yet, he pressed the accelerator a little harder, taking the turns carefully, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. Layla had said nothing more about her destination than the street name, and he didn't dare ask too much. The rain had stopped falling, but the night felt heavier, thicker. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and the faint outline of a lonely building appeared in the distance. A place Amir had never noticed before, even though he had driven these streets for years. And then, without warning, Layla's voice broke the silence again, almost a whisper, but heavy with fear. I don't know if I should go inside. But I have no choice. Amir gripped the wheel tighter, heart pounding. He didn't know what awaited them at the end of this ride, but he knew one thing. The night was far from over. Amir's cab rolled to a slow stop in front of a weathered, almost forgotten building. Its bricks were darkened with age, the windows dusty and cracked, and a flickering lantern barely lit the entrance. It was the kind of place people passed by without a second thought, but Layla froze, staring at it like it held all her fears, and maybe all her hope. I don't know if I should go in, she murmured again, voice shaking. She clutched the seat, fingers gripping the torn leather like it was a lifeline. But I have to. I don't have any other choice. Amir wanted to ask what was inside, who she was meeting, but something in her expression stopped him. There was panic there, yes, but also determination. She wasn't running from something simple. She was running from something heavy, something dangerous. He watched her gather herself, taking deep, shuddering breaths. Her gown, once bright and pristine, was now wrinkled and soaked, sticking to her like a second skin. The veil drooped over her face, casting shadows that made her look even more fragile. Yet, behind that fear, Amir sensed a spark, something that refused to break no matter how high the stakes were. Are you sure you're ready? Amir asked quietly, already knowing she would answer herself before he got a reply. Layla didn't look at him. She simply nodded, though her lips trembled, and her eyes darted to the darkened doorway. I have to. If I don't, I'll never be free. The words hung in the cab like smoke. Amir felt a chill run down his spine. He had spent decades seeing people in trouble, some running from poverty, some from heartbreak, some from things he couldn't even name. But tonight felt different. This was deeper, darker. Something about the tension in her body, the tremble in her voice, made him realize that stepping inside that building could change everything, for both of them. He reached for the handle, ready to open the door for her, but she stopped him. No, I need to do this alone. Her words only heightened the sense of danger. She climbed out, her wet dress making a soft, squelching sound against the pavement. Amir followed her with his eyes as she moved toward the building, each step deliberate, yet hesitant, like walking on the edge of a cliff. And then, just as she reached the threshold, a shadow moved behind the cracked glass. A figure, watching, waiting. Layla froze, eyes wide, and Amir's heart skipped. Whatever was inside, whatever she was running from, it was already aware of her. The night seemed to hold its breath, and so did Amir. Amir watched from the cab, hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Layla hesitated at the doorway, her soaked gown clinging to her like a second skin, the veil falling over her face in shadows. The street was eerily silent now. Even the distant hum of traffic had vanished, leaving only the whisper of the night air and the faint creak of the old building. She stepped inside slowly, one foot after the other, and the door groaned like it hadn't been opened in years. Amir's stomach twisted. Something about this place felt wrong, but he couldn't look away. He had spent his life helping people, driving them through storms, witnessing their highs and lows, but nothing had prepared him for this. The flickering lantern inside cast long, dancing shadows across the hallway, and Amir thought he saw movement, a figure shifting just beyond the dim light. Layla froze, her breath catching, and whispered, "Please, don't come in. It's not safe for anyone." Amir's heart ached, torn between following her and respecting her wish. He had learned long ago that some fears were too personal to force someone through, and yet he couldn't just leave her here, standing on the edge of whatever nightmare awaited. A sudden sound echoed from inside, a door slamming, or maybe a shout. Layla flinched violently, backing up a step. She tugged at the folds of her gown, trying to hold herself together. Amir could feel her panic radiating even through the distance. He had driven many people to desperate places before, but never like this. Never someone so young, so vulnerable, so clearly caught in a trap she hadn't chosen. Then came the faintest click, like a lock being engaged somewhere down the hallway. Amir's pulse quickened. Layla's eyes darted around, wide and terrified. He wanted to call out, to shout her name, but his voice seemed useless against the darkness swallowing the building. She took a shaky step forward, her heels slipping slightly on the wet floor, and Amir saw it, the shadow moving closer. Not a trick of the lantern, not the flicker of the rain-soaked night. A tall figure, slow, deliberate, waiting for her in the faint glow. Every instinct screamed danger. Layla's hand shot to her mouth, muffling a cry. Her breath came in shallow gasps, eyes locked on the figure, frozen in terror. Amir's chest tightened. He had driven through storms, escaped fights, and navigated a city full of desperate people. But this felt like stepping into someone else's nightmare. The night itself seemed to tense, the air thick, the silence louder than ever. He wanted to run in, to grab her, but something in her posture told him she needed to face whatever waited inside, at least for a moment. And then, just as Amir leaned forward, trying to see past the veil and the shadows, Layla whispered something that made his stomach drop, words so fragile yet urgent they cut through the night like a knife. They know I'm here, and they won't let me leave alive. The streetlights flickered outside, the shadows danced, and Amir realized, whatever this was, it was far bigger than either of them had imagined. Before Amir could even react, the front door creaked open behind him. A cold wind swept into the cab, carrying a faint, familiar perfume. He turned, heart pounding, and froze. Standing in the doorway wasn't a stranger, not exactly. It was Layla's fiancé, only he wasn't alone. Behind him were two more figures, all silhouetted in the dim lantern light. But what made Amir's blood run cold wasn't just their presence. It was what they were holding. Boxes. Small, nondescript boxes, each tied with black ribbon. And as the flickering light hit them, Amir realized with horror the boxes weren't empty. He caught a glimpse of something pale inside, something unmistakably human. Layla's gasp echoed through the cab, a sound raw with terror and disbelief. Amir's mind raced. He had thought the danger was the building, the shadow, the night itself, but now, the nightmare had a face, and it was far closer than he'd imagined. The fiancé's lips twisted into a smile, cruel and deliberate, and he stepped forward. Did you really think you could run from this, Layla? From all of us? Amir's hands shook on the wheel. The rain-soaked night had just become something far more sinister. And in that moment, he knew nothing would ever be the same again. Amir didn't think. Instinct took over. He threw the cab into reverse, the tires screaming against the wet pavement, splashing rainwater across the deserted street. Layla screamed behind him, her voice a mixture of fear and relief, but the figures at the doorway didn't flinch. They were ready, waiting, almost as if they had anticipated every move. He slammed the door, locked it, and jammed the accelerator to the floor. The old taxi shuddered and groaned, its engine roaring in protest, but it moved. Layla clutched the seat, shaking, but her eyes held something Amir hadn't seen before, determination. She wasn't just fleeing, she was fighting for her life. As they sped through the dark streets, Amir stole glances at her. The veil had fallen, revealing a face pale but fierce. They won't stop, she said, voice low but resolute. They'll come for me no matter where we go. You have to help me, Amir. He swallowed hard. I will. Just tell me what's happening. Layla's hands trembled as she pulled a small, crumpled envelope from inside her gown. Inside were photographs, grim, horrifying photographs showing her fiancé and his accomplices with the same boxes Amir had glimpsed earlier. Human lives, stolen, hidden, traded. It was worse than Amir could have imagined. Suddenly, headlights cut across the rearview mirror. They weren't alone. More figures emerged from the shadows, surrounding the cab, forcing Amir to swerve violently. Tires skidded, rain-slicked streets threatening to send them tumbling into the gutters. Heart hammering, he made a split-second decision. He would drive straight through the narrow alley to lose them. The alley was tight, lined with abandoned crates and broken fences, but Amir didn't hesitate. With a deafening crash, the cab smashed through an old gate, the metal ripping and sparks flying. They were inside a hidden courtyard now, momentarily safe, breathing hard, soaked to the bone. Layla leaned back, tears streaming, relief mixing with terror. We're alive," she whispered. Amir nodded, chest heaving, but the moment of reprieve was shattered by a sudden sound, a soft, deliberate clink from the passenger seat. He turned and froze. Layla wasn't alone in hiding something. A small, mysterious key gleamed in her hand. A key that Amir had no idea what it unlocked, but he knew instinctively it was far more dangerous than anything they had just escaped. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city slick and glistening under a pale, hesitant moon. Amir parked the cab in the quietest corner of the hidden courtyard, engine ticking as it cooled. Layla sat beside him, her gown torn, muddy, but her eyes, though still wide with fear, were calmer now. She held the small key tightly, as if it contained the last piece of a nightmare she had narrowly escaped. Amir exhaled slowly. "We're safe, at least for now," he said, though the words sounded fragile even to him. After everything that had happened, it felt impossible to believe. Layla turned to him, voice trembling but determined. "I can't go back, not to them. Not ever. That key, it's the only thing that can stop them, but I don't know how yet. I just know I have to try." Amir nodded, sensing the weight of what she carried. For years, he had driven through a city full of stories, some tragic, some ordinary, but this one had etched itself into his bones. It wasn't just about a desperate bride anymore. It was about courage, survival, and choices that could change everything. "I'll help you," he said simply. "I don't know what it opens or what we'll find, but we'll figure it out. You're not alone." Layla's lips curved into the faintest smile, gratitude shining through the exhaustion and fear. It was a quiet, human moment, the kind that felt like a lifeline after a storm. She rested her head briefly against the cab's door, letting herself breathe. Amir could feel her tension slowly easing, but he knew better than to let it fade completely. The danger wasn't over, it had only shifted. As dawn began to touch the horizon, painting the sky with muted pink and gold, Amir looked at the city around them. Streets that had seemed menacing in the night now appeared softer, familiar, almost forgiving. It was a new day, but also a reminder. Even in a world full of darkness, people could still fight, survive, and find moments of connection. Layla finally spoke again, voice steadier this time. "Thank you for seeing me. Not just a bride, not just someone in trouble, for seeing me." Amir gave a small nod, the corners of his mouth twitching in a tired but genuine smile. "Everyone deserves to be seen," he said, "even in the darkest night." And as they drove away from the old building, the city waking around them, the weight of the night still lingered, but so did hope. The key in Layla's hand gleamed softly in the morning light, a reminder that their story wasn't finished, that courage and human connection could light the way even in the deepest shadows. But somewhere, hidden in the city's corners, the shadows of the past were stirring again. The danger they had escaped had not vanished, it was only waiting. And Amir knew, as he glanced at Layla, that this ride, this night, was only the beginning of something far bigger. Yet for now, they had survived, together. And in that survival, there was a quiet, unshakable victory. That even ordinary people, like a tired taxi driver and a frightened bride, could face the unimaginable and live to tell the story.